Welcome to Lesson 9-5. Tonight we are going to compare and order fractions.
Hi there, welcome to Math Antics. In this video, we're going to learn how to compare fractions. This fraction has 25% more fiber than this fraction. But this fraction has trisodium phosphate. Well, it's not quite like that. Comparing fractions just means telling which one is bigger. You know, just like we do with regular numbers when we use the greater than, less than, and equal to signs. That sounds easy, right? But unfortunately, unlike regular numbers, it's not always easy to tell which fraction is bigger just by looking at them. That's because the value of a fraction depends on both the top and bottom numbers and how they relate to each other. For example, if you have to compare these two fractions, 1 over 3 and 1 over 10, some of you might be tempted to say that 1 over 10 is bigger because you know that 10 is bigger than 3, right? But we need to remember that the fraction is really a number written like a division problem, and its value depends on that division. So in this case, the 1 over 3 is really the bigger fraction, because its decimal value, what you get when you divide, is 0.33333, but the value of 1 over 10 is only 0.1. Okay, so comparing fractions isn't quite as easy as comparing regular numbers, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that hard. We're going to learn two methods for comparing fractions that make it very easy. The first method is called cross-multiplying, and it takes advantage of the fact that it's easy to compare fractions with the same bottom numbers. If two fractions have the same bottom numbers, then we can just compare the top numbers. That's because we're comparing the same size parts. We're comparing fourths to fourths, eighths to eighths, tenths to tenths, and so on. And the top number just tells us how many of those parts we have. So it's easy to see that 5/8 is more than 3/8. But many times you'll have to compare fractions that have different bottom numbers or different size parts. Fortunately, there's a trick we can do to make the comparison easy. There's a shortcut for comparing fractions. As long as we know that the bottom numbers of our fractions are the same, we don't really need to know what that number is. We just need to know what the top numbers will be, since those are the ones that we'll actually compare. So instead of multiplying each fraction by a whole fraction, we can just multiply the top number of each fraction by the bottom number of the other fraction. This is called cross-multiplying, because if you draw a diagram of what you're multiplying, it forms a crisscross pattern. After you cross-multiply, you'll have two numbers that would be the new top numbers if you had made like fractions, and those numbers will show you which fraction is greater. Let's try this cross-multiplying method on an example or two. Let's compare the fractions 7 over 8 and 4 over 5. We start by multiplying the second fraction's bottom number, 5, by the first fraction's top number, 7. And that gives us 35 for the new top number on this side. You'll always keep the answer on the side of the top number that you multiplied. Now for the other side. The bottom number, 8, times the top number, 4, gives us 32 for its new top number. Aha! Now it's easy to see that the fraction 7 over 8 is greater than the fraction 4 over 5 because its new top number, 35, is greater than the other new top number, 32. Let's do one more comparison by cross-multiplying. Let's compare 6 over 11 to 9 over 15. First we'll multiply 15 by 6 to get the new top number of the first side, which is 90. Now you can always use a calculator to do the multiplications if you need to. Next we multiply 11 by 9 to get the second new top number, which is 99. So that tells us that the second fraction, 9 over 15, is greater than the first fraction because its new top number, 99, is bigger. Pretty simple, huh?
All right, let's cross multiply a few more. 3 times 1 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. Therefore, 1/4 would be less than 2/3. 3/4 and 4/5. 5 times 3 is 15. 4 times 4 is 16. 3/4 is less than 4/5. What if I have a mixed number, 1 7/8 and 1 2/3? What I first look for is that my whole numbers are exactly the same. So 1 is equal to 1. Then I need to look at my fractions. This is where we compare. 3 times 7 is 21. 8 times 2 is 16. 1 7/8 is greater than 1 2/3. 2 6/7 and 3 13/14. Let's first compare the whole numbers. 2 is not equal to 3. 3 is greater. Therefore, I don't even have to compare the fractions because I know that 2 6/7 is less than 3 13/14. What I want you to do is I want you to take out your notes. We're going to be adding notes as the video goes on. 9-5 at the top. Our first step is to cross multiply. 5 6 4/5. I want you to actually write this down. 5 times 5, maybe even put an arrow on the end there to help you out, is 25. 6 times 4 is 24. Therefore, making this 5 6 is greater than 4/5.
Okay, cross multiplying is pretty cool, but there's another way to compare fractions that you need to know about. But this one's only really good if you can use a calculator. Remember, the reason that fractions are tricky to compare is because they're really division problems. But if we want to, we can just do the division and get the answer, which is the decimal value of the fraction. So if you have two fractions to compare, you can just do the division, preferably using a calculator, and then compare the decimal values. For example, let's say I offer to give you either 5/12 of a pizza or 7/15 of a pizza. Now you happen to be really hungry, so you want to choose the biggest amount. But it's not very easy to tell just by looking which is bigger, 5/12 or 7/15. This is where decimal values can really help you out. If you convert the fractions to decimals by doing division, it will make it much easier to see which one's bigger. 5 divided by 12 is about 0.42, and 7 divided by 15 is about 0.47. Yep, that makes comparing them much easier. Since 0.47 is greater than 0.42, it means that 7/15 is greater than 5/12, and that means that you'd rather have 7/15 of the pizza. Sometimes, when you compare fractions this way, you'll find two fractions that look different but have the same decimal value, like 3/8 and 15/40. If you convert each fraction to a decimal, you'll see that they both have the value 0.375. Two fractions that have different top and bottom numbers but the same value are called equivalent fractions. If two fractions are equivalent, then you can just use the equal sign to show the comparison between them, like this. Alright, so those are two great methods you can use to compare fractions. Cross-multiplying is simple and works great, even if you don't have a calculator. And comparing the decimal values by dividing is easy if you do have a calculator. As always, practice makes perfect. So spend some time doing the exercises for this section, and I'll see you next time.
Now, division is one that you will not be allowed to use in the classroom. But if comparing fractions ever comes up on the MCA or the MAP test and you are allowed to use a calculator, that is another option that you have. You could cross multiply or you could divide. So let's first look at the first one. I've got my calculator out. I do 9 divided by 10. I get 0.9. I hope you are writing this as the second way in your notes. 18 divided by 20 gives me 0.9. Therefore, 9/10 is equal to 18/20.
Hi, this is Sandra. Another way to compare fraction is to find a common denominator. Here is Miss Madden to tell you how.
All right, let's look at our first fraction. We have 2/3 and 1/4. What I need to do is I need to look at the denominators. The denominators are at the bottom. My denominators at the bottom are 3 and 4. When I find a common denominator, I need to first look to see what 3 and 4 have in common. So what I could do simply is I could start listing the numbers counting by 3. I can also start listing the numbers counting by 4. I need to then look to see what they have in common. 3, 6, 9, 12, 4, 8, 12, 16, they both have 12 in common. So 12 is going to be my common denominator. Now what I need to do is I need to figure out how did I get from 3 to 12. I multiplied it by 4. So 2 times 4 is going to be 8. How did I get from 4 to 12? Times 3. 1 times 3 is 3. Now I can easily compare 8 twelfths and 3 twelfths. Which one is bigger? Definitely 8 twelfths. So 2/3 is greater than 1/4. All right, let's look at another one. 6/7 and 6/8. What I need to do is I need to find a common denominator. I can start listing the numbers that 7 multiplied by, and then I can start the 8s. If I don't find any in common, I have to continue on. I'm going to show you one quick, easy way. What I can simply do is I can multiply 7 times 8. 7 times 8 is 56. If I count it by 7s, I will eventually get to 56. If I count it by 8s, I will eventually get to 56. So 56 is going to be my common denominator. How did I get 7 to 56? I multiplied by 8. So I need to multiply 8 times 6. 8 times 6 is 48. How did I get from 8 to 56? I multiplied by 7. 6 times 7 is 42. So I can now look at 48/56 and 42/56. Which one is the biggest? 4/9 and 2/3. I need to find a common denominator. I could count it by 9s, and I could count it by 3s. I can eventually find one, which is 9. I could have also simply done what? 9 times 3, because if I keep counting, I would have gotten up to 27, and if I'd keep counting here, I would have gotten up to 27. But they also have 9s in common, so either one would work. 9 and 9 we're going to use. How did I get from 9 times 9? Times 1. 4 times 1 is 4. 3 to 9 is times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 4/9 and 6/9. This one is definitely bigger. So 4/9 is less than 2/3. Let's look at another one, 5 and 8. What could be my common denominator? If you said 40, you were correct. 5 times 8 is 40. If I count it by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. If I count it by 8s, I will also get to 40. 5 times 8 is 40. 2 times 8 is 16. 8 times 5 is 40. 2 times 5 is 10. Which one is bigger, 16/40ths or 10/40ths? 16/40ths. So 2/5 is greater than 2/8. Now I have 3 to compare. This is right now why you cannot use the cross multiplying for this. You could use your calculator, but Mrs. Lamore and I want you to know how to do this not using a calculator. So what do you need to do? You need to find a common denominator. I could list and count up by threes, list, count up by fours, list, count up by tens. The easiest way to do is to take your highest denominator, which is 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. All right, now I'm going to look. When I count up by threes, hey, I will eventually hit 30. When I count up by fours, I will eventually hit 40. But guess what? I won't hit 40 or 30 when I count up by the opposites, meaning when I count up by threes, I'll never hit 40. When I count up by fours, I'll never hit 30. So that would not be a common denominator for all three. But when I count up by threes, I will hit 60. If I count up by fours, I will also eventually hit 60. So my common denominator would be 60. And 3 times what is 60? 3 times 20 is 60. So 2 times 20 is 40. 4 times what is 60? 4 times 15 is 60. So 1 times 15 is 15. And 10 times what is 60? 10 times 6 is 60. And 9 times 6 is 54. Now I can compare all of them using my fractions with my common denominator. Which one's the greatest? 54 over 60, which is 9/10. Which is the middle? 40 over 60, which is 2/3. And which is the least? 15 over 60, which is 1/4. Wow, let's take a look. Now I have 4 to do. Right away I can see which one's going to be the greatest. Can you tell? If you picked this one, you were correct. Why? Because it's got that whole number, a whole number 1. So that for sure is going to be my greatest. So I'm going to take that one out of the equation, and now I'm just going to look at 1/2, 1/4, and 5/6. What should I count up by? Let's count up by 6s because that's my greatest one. 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay, let's look. If I count up by 2s, I'm going to hit 6. But if I count up by 4s, I won't. If I count up by 2s, I'll hit 12. Hey, if I count up by 4s, will I hit 12? I will. So my common denominator is going to be 12s. 2 times 6 is 12. 1 times 6 is 6. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. 6 times 2 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10. So now I'm comparing 6/12, 3/12, and 10/12. And boy, this gets messy, doesn't it? All right, I have my greatest is 1 3/4. My second greatest would be what? If you said 5/6, you are correct. Second greatest. My third greatest would be 1/2. And my least would be 1/4. We're going to practice some more of this tomorrow. Hopefully you understand the 3 ways. Take out your notebook for the last note. Find a common denominator is your third way. 2 and 8. How did you find a common denominator? I could count it by 2s, I could count it by 8s, or I could simply do 2 times 8. 16, 16. How did I get from 2 to 16? I multiplied by 8. So 1 times 8 is 8. How did I get from 8 to 16? I multiplied by 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. Now I can easily compare 8/16, 14/16, and definitely 7/8 is larger than 1/2. Have a great night. I will see you tomorrow.
Bye. Have a good night.